For 11 years, he was Theo Huxtable. Every Thursday night, millions of American families sat in front of their television sets and watched a young black man grow up on screen. Not in poverty, not in tragedy, but in a warm Brooklyn brownstone, surrounded by a brilliant doctor father and a lawyer mother and siblings who loved him. Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't just play Theo Huxtable. For a generation of viewers, he was the son they wanted. The boy who learned his lessons. The kid who always came home. That image was so powerful, so complete, so deeply embedded into American culture, that even after the show ended, even after Malcolm grew into a full adult career as an actor, a musician, a father, people still saw Theo when they looked at him. Now, here's the number that breaks that image in half. $1.2 million. That is the amount Malcolm-Jamal Warner's widow says he promised her, in writing, in a prenuptial agreement, and never delivered. A $1 million life insurance policy he agreed to take out and never purchased. Annual payments he committed to and never made. A salary for his wife that was documented, signed, and then left unfulfilled when a wave off the coast of Costa Rica ended his life at 54 years old. And exactly 1 year after his death, 365 days after Tanisha Warner buried her husband, she filed a lawsuit. Not against a stranger, against her own mother-in-law. If Malcolm-Jamal Warner was ever part of your living room, as Theo, as a voice, as someone you grew up watching, leave a like right now, as a tribute to the man his family is now fighting over in court. Because what you are about to hear, very few people know. Malcolm-Jamal Warner was 14 years old when he walked onto the set of The Cosby Show for the first time. He was not a trained child actor with years of auditions behind him. He was a kid from Jersey City, New Jersey, who had done a little local theater, showed up to an open call, and somehow, out of thousands of children who auditioned, walked out as Theo Huxtable. What followed was not a childhood. It was a phenomenon. From 1984 to 1992, The Cosby Show was the most watched program on American television. At its peak, it drew over 30 million viewers per episode. It ran for 8 seasons. It won 6 Emmy Awards. It was broadcast in over 100 countries. And at the center of it, week after week, year after year, was Malcolm, playing the son of a family so idealized it became a cultural landmark. The weight of that is impossible to overstate. He did not grow up in private. He grew up in front of 30 million people. Every mistake Theo made, every lesson he learned, every moment of vulnerability the writers gave that character, Malcolm performed it. Live in front of an audience the size of a small country. He was a teenager processing adolescence, while an entire generation watched and projected their own hopes onto him. When the show ended in 1992, Malcolm was 22 years old. He had spent more than a third of his life being Theo Huxtable. What came next required something very different: the slow, difficult work of becoming himself. He kept acting, he directed, he played bass in jazz bands with a seriousness that had nothing to do with celebrity. He built a quieter adult career, guest roles, theater, music, that had real substance, even when it didn't have The Cosby Show's numbers. He became a father. He eventually found his way to Tanisha, the woman he would marry and whose last name he would share. By his 50s, Malcolm-Jamal Warner had done something genuinely rare for a child star. He had survived his own fame. Then, in June of 2024, he went to Costa Rica. The details are spare and confirmed. He was swimming. The water took him. He drowned at 54 years old, leaving behind a wife, a daughter, a career still in motion, and a financial arrangement with his wife, documented in a prenuptial agreement that had never been fully honored. He left behind promises he believed he had time to keep. Theo Huxtable always had time. The show was built on that premise. Every problem that arose in that brownstone got resolved before the credits rolled. 30 minutes. Maximum. Father explains, son understands, family hugs. Malcolm-Jamal Warner did not get 30 minutes. He got a wave he didn't see coming, and the people who loved him most were left behind, not with clarity, not with closure, but with a $1.2 million question that no television writer had ever thought to put in the script. There is a specific kind of grief that arrives not just with loss, but with paperwork. Tanisha Warner had already buried her husband. She had already lived through the phone call, the flight home, the funeral, the first weeks of silence in a house that used to hold someone she loved. She had done all of that. And then, somewhere inside the devastation of that first year, she had to open the documents her husband had signed. The agreements, the commitments, the promises written in legal language, and confront what was there and what was not. According to the lawsuit Tanisha filed in June of 2025, exactly 1 year after Malcolm's death, the prenuptial agreement between them contained specific financial commitments. Malcolm had agreed to take out a $1 million life insurance policy, naming Tanisha as the beneficiary. He had agreed to annual payments. He had agreed to a salary for his wife. None of it was in place when he died. This is not an allegation of malice. It is not a portrait of a man who deceived his wife deliberately. By every account, Malcolm-Jamal Warner was not that kind of man. What the documents suggest instead is something quieter and more universal. A man who made promises in good faith, who believed he had time, and who died before the architecture of his intentions could be built into something real. The insurance policy was never purchased. The payments were never made. The gap between what he meant to do and what he actually did, that gap is now $1.2 million wide. The mother, the fund, and the fault line. Here is where the story becomes something more complicated than a widow's grief. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's estate is not being administered by Tanisha. It is being administered by his mother, Pamela Warner, who serves as trustee of the family trust that controls his financial legacy. And it is Pamela, not an anonymous institution, not a corporation, not a faceless legal entity, whom Tanisha has named in her lawsuit. Two women, the woman who raised Malcolm, the woman Malcolm chose. Both of them loved the same man. Both of them lost the same man. And now they are on opposite sides of a legal filing, communicating through attorneys about money that Malcolm promised and never delivered. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what a trustee actually controls. Pamela Warner, as administrator of the family trust, holds authority over Malcolm's financial assets. What gets paid, what gets withheld, what gets contested. Tanisha's claim is not against Malcolm's memory. It is against the fund that holds what Malcolm left behind. This is not a villain's story. Pamela Warner is a mother who lost her child. There is no script for that. There is no framework inside human experience that makes the loss of a 54-year-old son, a son she watched become famous, a son she watched grow up in front of 30 million people, anything other than devastating. And yet, the prenuptial agreement exists. The commitments are documented, and Tanisha's attorneys argue that those commitments represent obligations that belong to the estate, obligations that the trust, administered by Pamela, has not honored. What we are watching is not a dispute about greed. It is a dispute about loyalty, about which relationship takes precedence when a man is no longer alive to speak for himself. about what the word family means when the people who share it cannot agree on what he would have wanted. 365 days. The timing of the lawsuit is the detail that stops you cold. Tanisha Warner did not file in the first weeks after Malcolm died, when grief was still too raw to translate into legal action. She did not file in the first months, when perhaps there was still the possibility that things could be resolved privately, quietly, between two families who had lost the same person. She filed exactly 1 year after his death. 365 days. That number tells you something about what happened in the year before the filing. It tells you that conversations were attempted, that some version of resolution was sought through channels that did not require courtrooms or attorneys or public record, and that those conversations, whatever form they took, whatever was said or offered or refused, did not work. By the time Tanisha signed those legal documents, she had already tried everything else. What does it cost a person to sue their mother-in-law? To transform private grief into public record? To take the most painful year of your life and lay it out in a legal filing that anyone can read? It costs something that cannot be measured in the same currency as $1.2 million. It costs the last version of privacy you had left. The lawsuit alleges that Pamela Warner, as trustee, has control over assets that should be used to satisfy the commitments Malcolm made. Pamela's legal team has not yet responded publicly to the specific allegations. The case is ongoing. No verdict has been reached. No settlement has been announced. What has been established, in documents, in filings, in the public record, is simply this. Malcolm-Jamal Warner made promises to his wife. He did not live long enough to keep them. And the two women who loved him most are now in a courtroom, asking a judge to determine what his word was worth. Theo Huxtable would have known what to do. The writers would have given him the answer by the second commercial break. Malcolm-Jamal Warner left no script. There is no version of this story that ends cleanly. That is the hardest thing to sit with. Not the lawsuit, not the $1.2 million, not even the legal arguments about what a prenuptial agreement obligates a trust to pay. The hardest thing is the image underneath all of it. Two women who loved Malcolm-Jamal Warner, loved him in completely different ways, for completely different reasons, across completely different versions of his life. His mother, who held him before the world knew his name. His wife, who chose him after the cameras were gone, after Theo Huxtable had long since faded into something Malcolm carried rather than performed. Both of them are still grieving, and they cannot speak to each other anymore without lawyers in the room. Malcolm spent 11 years playing a character who lived inside a family where everything worked, where fathers had the right words, where misunderstandings dissolved before the episode ended, where love in the Huxtable house was always sufficient, always organized, always expressed, always enough. The real world does not write scripts like that. Malcolm-Jamal Warner was not Theo Huxtable. He was a man, fully human, fully imperfect, who loved people and made promises and ran out of time before he could honor them. He did not leave behind a villain. He left behind a void. And into that void, two grieving women have had to pour all of the pain and the paperwork and the impossible question of what he would have wanted. He is not here to answer it. That is the cruelest part. Not the money, not the lawyers, the silence where his voice should be. Because if Malcolm-Jamal Warner could walk into that courtroom right now, past the attorneys and the filings and the $1.2 million, the first thing he would want is for those two women to stop hurting each other over something he left unfinished. But wanting something and leaving instructions for it are two different things. And the distance between those two things, the gap between intention and action, between love and paperwork, between the life we plan and the one we actually leave behind. That distance is where this story lives. That is where Malcolm-Jamal Warner's story lives now. Not in the courtroom, not in the lawsuit, in the space between what he meant and what he left. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because the question of what Malcolm owed, and to whom, is one that his family is still trying to answer. Like and subscribe if this story moved you, because behind every famous face, there is a private world most people never see, and we are here to show it to you every single week.